Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Hey folks, Al Martin here in Making Data Simple. We are back again. Thanks for listening as always. I am with Dave Martin, who is a seasoned Silicon Valley entrepreneur, he's a CEO and he's an investor. He founded and serves as the managing director for 280 Capital Partners, and this is a firm dedicated to strategic advisory and investment in tech companies. And throughout Dave's career, he's led 4 IT companies as CEO. I understand he retired at 44. I'm going to have to ask him how he did that, but he has been a strategic advisor or an executive chairman for numerous other companies. And he's written a book called Mega Thinking, and that introduces a structured approach to effective thinking. Dave, thank you for being here. Great to have you.
My pleasure. Having worked at IBM, I feel like I've come home.
So how long did you work at IBM?
It was very short. I was an aeronautical engineer at Princeton, New Jersey. I got married in college and was coming out to go to Stanford Business School back in the day when you could go directly from undergraduate to get an MBA. And on our way out with my new wife, I diverted through a guy I had interviewed for my thesis at Princeton, who was a top IBM psychologist, Saul Gellerman. And he connected me to the branch manager at IBM Palo Alto, Elmer Dorman. And in a half an hour, we went through a phone interview and he hired me. And so I joined IBM. And unfortunately, I had enough success to where I got a promotion opportunity in IBM to go back to White Plains. And I turned that down because we just had one child, didn't want to move. And then the second promotion I got to was to Atlanta. I turned that down. And we had our second child, fell in love with Silicon Valley. So the IBM manager finally said, Dave, you're going to have to find a different place because you don't turn down 2 promotions at IBM. So I joined the Silicon Valley startup group, and I joined a small company of about 40 people right out of IBM, and that's where I've been ever since. Silicon Valley rat, Silicon Valley entrepreneur, Silicon Valley CEO, and been here ever since.
All tech companies you've been CEO of, or different variety?
All tech. If you go back to when Silicon Valley really was coming into its own, basically the technology was semiconductors and storage. Semiconductors all broken off from Fairchild Semiconductor, the leader then, and storage all broken off from IBM's storage design and manufacturing facility in San Jose, California. And then it evolved from there into many, many other parts of technology that you can write a book about, and it has. So I've been in storage, I've been into mainframe computers, I've been into infrastructure software, I've been into communication software, security software. So it's all different forms of technology. And more recently, as I've become a coach, a confidant to other tech CEOs, I've tended to go more toward vertical technology spaces like AI-based software for healthcare. So I've been in almost everything over my career.
So all industries then? I mean, it sounds like you're focusing in on AI for healthcare at this moment.
I'd say if you divide industries into horizontal apps, I think I've hit every one horizontally, and database and MRP and CRM and et cetera. And then vertically, I thought I hit almost all of them until I connected up with a classmate and football teammate from Princeton, who was a leading pediatric surgeon in the world and had created a new company to apply AI to healthcare. So that's probably my last one that I'm going to try to conquer. And it's fascinating if you go vertical on technology, what you learn. And if you take AI as the hottest new technology, and you look at the verticals that will be impacted by AI, right at the top is healthcare, right behind it is education, right behind that is media. And so AI makes the internet and all of its explosive impact on vertical industries like internet, Amazon, retail, AI makes that look like a piker, and it's going to explode into all these verticals in multiple ways, as IBM knows and has really led the parade on with Watson.
Well, look, going back to IBM, it sounds like you were just too good at your job, Dave. You kept getting promoted. That was the problem.
Right.
Then you retired at 44. How does one do that?
You get into Silicon Valley or any place else like Boston or Austin, Texas, Tel Aviv, and get into startups, because the secret sauce of startups is you don't make much money to start, but if you're successful and have a company that exits either by IPO or acquisition, the leverage is phenomenal. And of course, I think at this point, 8 of the 10 largest wealthy individuals in the country are all directly related to tech, starting with Elon.
I got you. Well, I'm going at the big blue route, so I'm not retiring quite yet, but I do love tech. So look, do you consider you're a technologist now, or are you a coach, or are you both?
I was never a technologist. I was an engineering major, and that's tech. And back when IBM was on its power curve of 60s, 70s, 80s, when you were hired by IBM, they assumed that you needed to be trained and become a computer scientist. So my first year with IBM was almost all in training sessions, therefore converted from aero engineering tech to computer science tech. But my focus as a functional executive, and my definite priority as a CEO of 4 companies, was to really focus on not the product technology per se, but how you create go-to-market strategies to make that successful. Some of the most successful tech companies have had the best technology, but they also had the best go-to-market, marketing, sales, et cetera. And one of the things IBM taught me in the short time I was there was, at IBM, marketing, sales in those days was everything. And they put such a premium on how do you do that professionally and therefore make what you have to offer, a computer mainframe, different from everybody else. There are many other companies that I've been coaching that don't have the best technology, put together the best go-to-market plans, and sometimes that works to the point where they succeed better than the alternative. I'm a CEO leader, and as a coach to 24 plus other CEO tech leaders, I'm a leader of leaders, and my book is all about how you think smarter and apply better thinking to become a better leader, decision maker. And that book was gleaned going all the way back to my Princeton days, and then developed over the ages. One brief story: when I was at Princeton, I had gotten all A's in high school, and especially in math and science and so on. That's why I was told to become an engineer. At Princeton, all engineers have to take Physics 101, and it's a hard course. And in high school, I used to use my brain power to remember stuff and get A's, and that no longer worked at Princeton. So I was taking Physics 101 in the first week, my freshman year. They had a weekly quiz for 4 problems, 10 points each. I took the quiz thinking I did okay. I went over and checked it out on Saturday because they published all the scores, and on the computer printout in IBM printer paper, it started with people that got 40 points out of 40, and then they had 5 different runs, and I had gotten a 5, and I thought my life was over. So I went to football practice, 3 hours of sweat and tears, walked back and looked again, and I still had a 5. I went back to the 40, and there were 3 40s out of a couple of hundred students. And I picked one that I'd met in my dorm, and I went back, and his name was Jim. And I said, Jim, can I ask you how you got a 40? He said, bring me your notebook from the lectures last week. And I did that. And I was so proud. I had 7-page detailed notes of the lectures. And he said, well, I think I see the problem. Let me show you my notebook. His notebook from the same lectures was half a page. And what he was writing down was the megaceps, the biggest, greatest thoughts on what he heard, thinking about it. What I was writing down was just taking input and putting it down in my notebook as output. I wasn't thinking about it. And so that's where the term megaceps came from. And that began my belief that thinking is really the most important thing you can do in your life at many, many different levels. And the neat thing about IBM was I show up for my first day in the office and I get my desk out in the bullpen. And there on my desk is the IBM Think sign. And I said, wow. One of the quotes in my book, and there's a whole bunch of quotes from people like Plato and T.J. Watson and Edison and Einstein. I ended up with 20 different think signs in different languages on my desk. Just say, think, 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 think.
Hey, before I get into mega thinking, I got one more question for you. You've got quite a track record that is built into your concepts that you outline in mega thinking, which I want to talk to next. But you were the CEO of 4 companies. That's quite a feat. And then retiring at 44. My question for you is, can you just describe one of those companies, maybe the company that had the most profound impact, so we get an idea of where you got some of your experience?
The first company was a company called Advanced Memory Systems, which ended up changing its name to Intersil. We were one of the first 3 creators of DRAMs. In those days, the DRAM size was 1K. And the other 2 companies in that space were IBM spinoff called Kogar in Intel. And what I learned from that is kind of what I said earlier, that if you have the best technology, I thought our company did, you're not going to necessarily win. Intel won because they convinced the world that if you bought the Intel 1103 1K DRAM, that they would produce millions and millions of them, and so you didn't have to worry about any supply problems. This other company didn't think that way. But the one that I liked the most from the standpoint of what happened and who I was competing with and what we had to do to compete and win was a company that I founded and started, and then over a 15-year period, it grew from 0 to $1.2 billion. The final name of the company, as I ran it as CEO, was called National Advanced Systems. And we competed across the board with mainframes, storage, networking equipment, software against 2 companies, IBM and Amdahl. That was back in the 70s, 80s, or early 90s. So growing a company from 0 to 1.2 billion is very, very unusual. And that's where I had to really teach myself, how do you lead? You know, when we founded the company, there was 2 of us. We ended up selling that company to a joint venture between a major Japanese company, Hitachi, and they had a joint venture with, at the time, the largest systems integrator, Electronic Data Systems, Ross Perot's company. And that's where I got my ticket to ride to retire at 44. So I didn't have the luxury of being at an IBM where I could go into management training and be taught how to lead and that sort of thing. I had to figure it out on my own with OJT. And in some respects, that's the best way to learn if you really focus on that. So that kind of an experience, you had to really think to get through and win enough deals to build a company of that size.
All right, so let's make the transition quickly to mega thinking. So how old is this book, and what sparked mega thinking?
The answer to the latter question is everything I did up to the point we just stopped. And then when I came out of retirement, I started coaching other CEOs and their leadership teams and their boards of directors. And that's what I've done formally 25 times and have done informally another many dozen. And so what was my vehicle for coaching other smart CEOs and their leadership team? My vehicle was to say, I bet everyone doesn't think smart enough about how to run their company, and therefore they aren't making the best leadership decisions they can make. And so I just kept refining the concept of the book. And some of those stories are explained in the book, but the simple mega thinking process, which sounds so simple that it can't be powerful, but as Einstein proved with E equals mc squared, pretty simple, or the golden rule, doing to others as you would have them doing to you, or the Bill of Rights top 10, you can capture in very few simple steps what powerful thinking needs. And so the 4 steps of the book, very simplistic, is the first thing you have to do is think for yourself. Don't collect a whole bunch of inputs and get swallowed up in too much data information. Let's say you want to think about, I'm growing at 10% CAGR as a company revenue wise. I want to double that. Well, how do I go about doing that? Let's assume that's the topic. One, you got to write down your mega thinking, megacept greatest thoughts on that. To capture that in a little more graphic terms that you guys would identify with is the computer model, which has been around since the 40s and is still valid and is even valid with AI, is a box. And coming in the left side of the box is input. And at the bottom of the box is storage. And coming out the right side of the box is output. And in between, very importantly, is processing. Now, if you program a computer to take an invoice and write a bill, it does it perfectly. It thinks, processes, input, stores, and then creates output. What so many human beings do, and I find this even in the most intelligent, successful leaders, they skip the processing box too much, and they let input become output, or input becomes storage, and then output. And that's exactly what I was doing in that physics notebook. I was taking input, I stored it in my notebook, and then when I took the quiz, I then my output was the stuff I had stored. I wasn't thinking about it. So, step one, you got to think for yourself about whatever topic that you want to cover. I want to double my growth rate from 10% to 20%. The second thing is pick 2 or 3, not 50, not 0, people that you think may have other relevant complementary thoughts on that topic. If you're running a company, very often they'll be your own staff. Sometimes, many times, CEOs, leaders want to get external input on it. So you go through the same process and get, let's say, 2 or 3 additional inputs on thinking about how do I double my growth rate. Third, then you do a little practical research, but now it's so easy to do research, focused research, and get valid input that you can think through. And then finally, after those 3 steps, you finalize and write down your final megacepts, greatest thoughts on how do I double my growth rate. Now, it's important for 2 reasons. One,
so you're not a big believer in wisdom of crowds, then?
No. I'll disagree with myself, but in that process, you don't need crowds. You need yourself, number one, and then the other steps. And so you end up with a 1 or 2 page summary of the megacepts, the greatest thoughts on how do I double my growth rate, and then you circulate and communicate that and get people to participate in understanding it, like your leadership team. Very importantly, and by the way, you probably use the same thing to communicate if you're CEO to your board of directors. Here's how we're going to double our growth rate board, and it makes it very understandable. You don't need a 40-slide PowerPoint to get the points across. They're simple but powerful. Then it's captured. And the great thing about doing it that formally, instead of seat of the pants or don't confuse me with the facts, my mind's already made up, or all the other psychological barriers to thinking on the part of leaders, including political leaders, you say, well, we're not growing at the rate I expected after 3 months. And then you go back and you repeat the process, and you're establishing an audit trail of thinking. And as simple as that sounds to do, a lot of people don't do it. They do it seat of the pants. I've been working for 30 years. I don't need to be told how to do it. This is how we do it. one of my favorite examples is a guy that is famous in the world for founding Apple, Steve Jobs. And I'm on the board of the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. It has a lot of from Silicon Valley and around the world. And he's given us an oral history back when he was alive. And he talked about how he made Apple so successful. Well, he then he got fired by John Sculley, the new CEO, and went to found a new company called Next. And Next was a computer. It was a workstation, powerful workstation. And he took the same thinking that he used to create this incredibly successful PC company, Apple, to create Next. And it failed miserably. Hundreds of millions of dollars down the drain because he thought, I did it that way. I'm going to do it again. And I won't go through all the reasons why the Apple startup was successful and the Next was failure. But he just repeated the same recipe. Never do that. Always think about what this particular challenge, starting Next as a company, is.
So repeat the 4 steps. I mean, in short.
Sit down, carefully define the topic you want to think about. I want to find out how I can begin growing my company by 2 times what we're growing at now. That's the topic. Then you put down what you think is the 10 or fewer mega steps, 10 or fewer greatest thoughts that relate to achieving that doubling of growth. Then you assemble
what you call mega step. I got it.
Mega steps. And the 10 or fewer is a critical point. And you know, all it is a matter of prioritizing and rank ordering. But a lot of people don't do that. And a lot of people end up with 50 ideas, and it should be 10. And so one of the thesis of the book is that any topic, no matter how simple or how complex, peace in the Middle East or starvation in Africa, whatever the topic is, no matter how complex, you can break it down into 10 or fewer mega steps or greatest thoughts on the topic. And the book develops 8 major religions in the world, 7 major forms of government in the world, and 3 major branches of science. And my grandson, who's a PhD now at Stanford, took each of those, and I said, go find the mega steps, 10 or fewer on each of these 18 items. Every one, and they're all chronicled in the book, every one has 10 or fewer mega steps that if you understand them, then you can understand the whole topic broader. 10 commandments for Christianity, right. The original Bill of Rights, 10 for the Democratic Republic of the United States, and on and on and on and on. So, so that's step 1. Step 2 is assemble people that may know something about it, or maybe some that don't, and refine that through a step 2. Then do some relevant directed research that is now in today's world very easy. Just think of the power of a topic like that relating to what you could ask ChatGPT to find or Watson to find. It's mind-boggling how powerful that little step can be. And then finally, you unilaterally at that point say, these are my deemed 10 or fewer greatest thoughts on how to double the growth rate of my company. Boom. Then you communicate them to all relevant people, your staff, your board, anyone else externally, and then you watch them and you track them, and then finally you get to where either it's working or it's not, and you now have the perfect audit trail to say, this is what I thought and why, and now I need to change because it's not working, or I need to reinforce it because it is working.
Thank you for that. Let me ask you this follow-up question. What are the most common small mindsets that hold people back? You're talking about mega thinking. What's holding people back?
You're going to think I'm crazy to say this, but the biggest thing holding people back through my, let's say, few hundred leaders, CEOs, their leadership team, their boards, they think they're thinking, but they don't think.
They're just reacting to the problem?
Yeah. And again, if you've really been successful, like Steve was, you say, I know what to do. I don't need anybody's help. I don't have to think about it any differently. So that would be a 0th point. They don't think enough smartly. The second is when they think, they don't think in a very, very structured way. Structured thinking is a whole subject unto itself. The book touches on that. It's not seat of the pants. It's very organized. That's why you have things like 10 or fewer mega steps and that sort of thing associated with a 4-step process, et cetera. A structured way of thinking is the second delimiter. And then again, back to the Steve Jobs story. Almost every time you think about something that's important enough, you can think in the box, and everybody does that in the box. But you should probably every time think out of the box. There's a famous quote about out of the box thinking, and the quote is, "I wanted to think out of the box about this, but I couldn't find the box."
Is that your quote? Am I going to tweet that? I'm going to tweet that.
So, boy, it's just, Alice, it's blocking and tackling fundamentals. I've been an athlete all my life through college and beyond, and if you really look at how you become the best at a sport, any sport, it's knowing what you're doing, but also discipline, blocking and tackling fundamentals, and that's the key to better thinking. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need some magical, new theory of how to think. There are some really good, areas like that. Just it's basics, and again, the whole theme of the book is making it simple but also powerful. And that's what I've observed with all these people that I've coached. Their eyes light up. Big companies often sign multi-million-dollar contracts to an outside consulting firm like Boston Consulting Group or McKinsey, and bring them in to say, help me with deciding on what to do about this. And it could be a very sophisticated strategic topic. Should I become an acquirer of smaller companies in my space or whatever? If you look at what the highly paid consulting companies like those two do, it's basics. It's blocking and tackling. It's a SWOT diagram. SWOT diagrams are about as simple as you can get about a structured thinking: strength, weakness, opportunity, threats. And that's what they apply. So keep it simple.
If I go back to your Princeton example, where you said your buddy was implementing quote unquote mega thinking when he took fewer notes, what was it about that experience that gave you an epiphany? It's just that you were trying to study everything instead of the most important topics. What was it that tied directly into your theory of mega thinking?
Back to the computer model, what I was doing was taking a whole lot of input, 2 1-hour lectures with a professor writing stuff and saying stuff. And it was just taking that input and storing it in my notebook. And I wasn't thinking about what he was saying and why it was important. When you do that, input becomes storage, and then that becomes the output. You're not thinking. What he was doing is he would listen, and either the professor would say, now, this is a very important point to understand. From that point, when I went to lectures, I started saying, okay, now I'm in, advanced calculus that freshman year. And it was getting, in those days, pretty complex. So I would just then apply his approach, and I would leave the advanced calculus room with maybe a page, and then I'd go home and think about the page. And therefore, what I was storing away from that same lecture in calculus was the most important mega thinking thoughts on that topic. And then when I went back to the notebook to study for the midterm or the final, that's what I was looking at. I wasn't looking at notes. I was looking at my thoughts.
So is there a case or any case where mega thinking is not appropriate?
Yeah, definitely. Because, what we've been talking about as leaders and by implication, technology, because of my background, if you think about the brain, it operates at 3 levels. One is subconscious. And by the way, the reason your brain and your thinking from the brain, subconscious thinking, is the most important thing in your life is without that, you die. It controls everything subconsciously. And it does that without any intervention from you. The second is, more common everyday stuff, getting dressed, commuting, getting ready to go to the store to get something, or if anything, you should avoid don't overthink that. don't don't spend half an hour looking into your closet to decide what you're going to wear today. Just let that just flow. But boy, then you move to any other topic, and they can be anything from very personal to very complex. In the book, one of the things I try to do is say this isn't a book just for leaders in the form of business, nonprofit, government leaders. This is for leading on any topic in your life. And so one chapter is on a parent who wants to become the best mother to her teenagers, and she applies the actual process applied, and comes up with the mega steps of how to be the best parent to a teenager. And then there's another one on developing interpersonal skills, another one on developing knowledge, or working knowledge of AI, another one on understanding why the number 3 killer of kids or people in the United States is medical errors. How can that be? Anything you want to lead that's a little more complex than getting dressed, I don't think there's any place where it's not applicable. If you start doing it, and a number of my clients have told me this, it makes thinking fun, because thinking can be intimidating and intimidate people to not think and just avoid or kick the can down the road or other things. If you get comfortable with, I have the ability to think better than I've ever thought before on a topic, it becomes a game, a sport, a challenge that is fun.
You're like the walking poster board for Thomas J. Watson on Think. So by the way, Steve Jobs must have been a mega thinker, because he used to wear the same black turtleneck, I think, every day. So he didn't have to make that decision. He could just focus on the bigger topics at hand.
I didn't take step 3 with Steve. Step 1 was Apple, which he was a genius. And, Wozniak was the techno genius. And then turns out Steve was the marketing genius. And then that failed at Next. Then he was brought back at Apple, as everybody knows. And he completely rethought, how do I take a dying business? Mac was losing share to IBM PCs at the gazoo. Some of their early, handheld things were failures. He comes back and he totally rethinks, what can we use our technological capacity to do? And he created, what is now the 3rd or 4th most valuable companies in the world. That's an incredible example of learning. Don't just, replicate things and think they're going to work again. I am a forever fan of IBM, and I was there during the heyday when we beat everybody, and we got sued for it by the government, and we were on a power curve, religiously respecting what TJ Watson Sr. and his son Jr. did, and then picking up from them, Kerry and others. One of my all-time favorite experiences with IBM was IBM's 100th anniversary, which occurred 5-10 years ago. They had a East Coast and West Coast celebration, and I don't know where the East Coast was, but they asked to have the celebration for the 100th anniversary of IBM at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, and I was asked to join him in a tour of the facility, and then he was going to give his speech and celebrate the 100th year. We took him,
which was 2011, by the way. 2011.
Yeah, 2000. We took him to one section of the exhibit. It's a massive exhibit. If you've never been there, come on out and I'll take you there. And it's amazing stuff. There was a storage area, and in that storage area, we had found an old 2305 Ramac, which was the first moving disk storage designed and manufactured at IBM San Jose. It held, I think, 2.5 megabytes, but it worked. We turned the corner. I'm with Sam, and there around the Ramac were these 3 older gentlemen, and they were in their dark suits and white shirts and dark ties and wingtips, and they reached out and we introduced them as the 3 original designers of Ramac. And so Sam looks at them and he starts crying. Sam.
Huh, that's fantastic. Hey, look, what habits or clues? Success leaves clues, or patterns do top mega thinkers have?
I think the umbrella answer, which again becomes a whole subject unto itself, is I think the most powerful way to lead And therefore, the most powerful leaders lead participatively. Many, many leaders think if they do that, they'll lose control. Or many others say, I don't need anybody's input. I know all there is to know. If you simply say, I can't be the optimum best leader I can be in life without participative leadership, and you study that enough to know exactly what that means everybody listens to everybody else, including the top guy listens to everybody else, and there's iteration, and 10 brains are better than one, all that sort of stuff. Because if you take that 2-word participative leadership mantra and say, how do I do that on a topic, then you automatically are going to go about thinking about that topic in the proper way. So many of my clients, CEOs, didn't start that way. And one famous one I won't name, but he worked at IBM, senior executive, HP senior executive, and then he was brought into a smaller public company, and he said he needed to cut 20% of the staff to keep the company profitable, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it because he said, "Oh, I'm from IBM and HP. We're full employment. We never have layoffs and so on." This is many decades ago. I said, "Big mistake," and so he got fired. He and I were having a margarita at a local bar, and he was saying, "My life is over. My career's over." I said, "Not at all. You just learned something, and one of the things you learn is lead participatively," because he had other people both on his board and me telling him he was not listening. Lo and behold, he became CEO of another company and now a multi-billionaire.
Here, I got one final question, and that is, look, if you were to summarize all of this, what's the one powerful habit you can implement immediately around mega thinking?
I just use 2 words, just force yourself every day to apply structured thinking to anything, everything. I have a calendar, and I have exactly thought through what happens each day, and I cross them out when they're done, and I then change things down multiple days because I learned something from the prior day. I mean, that's just a stupid example, but I have a meeting coming up at 2 with a company that's based in Princeton and is applying AI technology to revolutionize the debt marketplace, the total debt marketplace, OTC bonds and related, is $40 trillion, and it's basically illiquid. It's not like the stock market, and that, it's partly because it's a very complex interchange between buyer and seller, and what something's worth versus having a New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ tell you what it's worth. So that company needs $2 million to take its current proof of concept product to a level where one of the key partners in that space, that you'd know their name, is going to buy it and therefore prove it, and therefore will then build the company up from there. So I'm the newly found executive chairman of that company, and this meeting is to discuss that, raising that $2 million. I sent them over the weekend 3 documents, each megacep oriented, on 3 aspects of that, raising that money. And so everything I try to do, I try to use structured thinking for. And
where can folks reach you, and where can folks grab your mega thinking book?
Why don't I send this to you guys? But the book website is megathinkingbook.com, www, and it contains everything you could possibly want to know about me in the book, and maybe more. But there's blogs on there about various topics, and there's chapters illustrated, and you can get a free chapter downloaded if you want to check it out. It has a link to the Amazon page where you can buy the book. The other way is just go directly to Amazon and just put in Mega Thinking Book.
Dave, how long has the book been out?
It was put on Amazon on October 4th.
October 4th. All right. Nice.
Hey, guys, it was great being with you. I feel like I've gone home to IBM.
Well, you're welcome here, man. Glad that we've got a fellow IBMer on the call. Sounds like you've made the most out of it. So great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And again, we appreciate you being on the podcast. And if I could just thank the listeners for listening. As always, hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. Love to hear back from you. Please rate us wherever flavor of podcast you're listening to. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.